Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table. I'm your host, Dawn Deckman-Moeller, and today we have our guest, Greg Laemmle. Greg Laemmle is the president of Laemmle Theaters, a family-owned and operated company which has been exhibiting movies in Los Angeles since 1938. Welcome, Greg.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you've joined our show today. We've got some important topics that we want to cover. We want to talk about your family history, the beginning of the Laemmle Theaters, and you also have a film that was directed by Raphael Sbarge that is available for people to view also. So we're going to cover a few topics today in our hour. We're going to take a real quick break and come back, and we'll see you in just a minute. Welcome back to the Captain's Table with our guest, Greg Laemmle. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
We're so glad you're here today, and I'm excited to have our viewers learn about your family and some rich history in our country. Would love to open up and start at the beginning and learn a little bit about your family history.
Okay.
So we'll just have a conversation.
I love it.
So tell me, how did your family come to America? We all have some wonderful stories. I'm a third-generation immigrant from Czechoslovakia and from England and some other countries. So tell me about your history coming
Right.
here.
Well, the Laemmle family goes back to a small village in southern Germany called Laupheim. I was visiting there in 2017 and went back to the old Jewish cemetery, and there's 5 or 6 generations of Laemmles
Wow.
represented there. So that was really special. But in the late mid 19th century, one of the family members immigrated to America. His name was Carl Laemmle,
Okay.
and he ended up going into the dry goods business in the Midwest, in Chicago and Oshkosh, and that part of the country. And one day he saw a line of people at a business.
Yeah.
They were going in and leaving money and then leaving the store with nothing to show for it.
What were they buying?
Well, they were going to a Nickelodeon.
A Nickelodeon. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Carl saw that and thought that was a real great opportunity, and ended up going into the business of first running some small movie theaters. This is in the very early 20th century.
Right.
Um,
Did he
and then
acquire?
eventually,
Go ahead.
what's that?
No, I said, did he acquire, did he take a space and create a Nickelodeon? Or
Yeah.
did he, okay.
Yeah, he started there and then
Mhm.
probably started acquiring some, and eventually had a small circuit, and then he started producing his own films. And that ultimately got him in opposition with Thomas Edison,
Oh,
who had a patent on the movie making process.
that's
Um,
unbelievable. I
yeah, so
go ahead. I'd like you to back up just a second here for
of course.
our audience. So the Nickelodeons would have the silent films at that time. Is that correct? With maybe a pianist playing the music? What was that
Yes, generally
experience
something.
like?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Well, you weren't there. I'm thinking from what I've only seen in movies, right?
So, yeah, we've seen it in movies, or paper. Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
You'd mentioned that. Now, I'm sorry. Is this Carl, your great uncle? Your uncle?
so Carl is he's my great grandfather's first cousin.
Okay, your great grandfather's first cousin.
So Carl ends up basically founding a company that is now today Universal Pictures.
Yes,
And
that's
if you go on the Universal Studios tour, you'll hear his name as the founder of the company.
Okay. Do you know
And
I haven't been on the tour, and I'm from Burbank. And it's on
how could that be?
it's on my bucket list. So,
Yes.
and all that land was that. Tell me about the land that it was. Was that land that he purchased? That area?
Yeah, he purchased that land.
Gosh.
With the idea of having a studio he was not the first producer to come out to Los Angeles to make movies, but he was the first to move his entire base of operations
Right.
out here, in part to get away from Edison,
Yes.
who was based in New Jersey, and New Jersey was, at one time the early, center of film production.
And so Edison had, did you say a patent
Yes,
on?
Edison claimed a patent on the process of making the movie making process.
Okay. That's very, very interesting. I did not know that.
And yeah, no, and Laemmle claimed that, hey, how can this patent be valid? The movie making process was independently derived by the Lumiere brothers in France and other people working on
Uh-huh.
these kinds of things. So, if it's not unique, it can't be a patent.
Right.
Eventually, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
It did.
Yep.
Oh, I'm gonna
And
have to look that up.
Laemmle et al. were winners in the case.
S-
Interestingly, one of the factors was the idea of Edison said, look, the perforations on the side of the film that control the rate at which it moves forward are, a unique feature. No one else thought of this kind of thing. And someone pointed out, well, there are perforations on a roll of toilet paper.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
he broke up a
So
monopoly.
that
He
broke
broke up
up
a monopoly.
He did break up a monopoly. Yeah, I mean, look, there were independent producers, but as
Yes.
long as everybody had to pay Edison and everything needed to go through Edison, Edison was taking, fees all along the way.
That's amazing. We don't have in our country. There's some other type of monopolies that have come and gone. Probably like the AT&T, and then they broke up to the Baby Bells, and then they
Right.
ended up coming back to the full AT&T company again. But we don't have in our history, a ton of Supreme Court hearings like that. So that is historic within itself. Opened up the
Yeah.
business for. It changed the
Opened up the
business.
business for all the
Yes.
independent producers. Now, all of a sudden, if we don't have a patent with Laemmle, then, I'm sorry, with Edison,
Yeah.
the numbers are better. And,
I like that.
and from there, you see, obviously, all the studios that we have today.
Oh my gosh,
And the independent producers.
the
But
grassroots, right, of
yeah, yeah,
indies.
yeah. But in the meantime, he had moved. He bought the property in with the city of, I guess they called it Lancashire back then.
La-
Um,
I didn't know that. God, I'm learning
yeah,
a ton. I mean, I'm second
yeah.
generation Burbank.
About your old neighborhood. Uh,
Like Lancashire,
but
absolutely.
and it was a chicken ranch or chicken farm.
Okay,
And they kept the chickens, and and they would invite people to watch the movie making process. You could actually watch the movies being made because they were silent films, so
right.
you didn't have to worry about people making noise or anything like that. And when people left, they would try and sell them the eggs.
Oh my God, yeah. I think there was a movie that came out last year, and quite a bit of the film was watching silent pictures being made, and there was more
Hmm.
than one on the same lot, and there was no
Yeah,
sound. So I did not know though that that was a ranch. So
yeah.
I think about what era, what year do you think that was? That was the 30s.
I believe
30s.
Universal was formed in 1912, I
Okay,
think,
gotcha.
and Universal Studios on the ranch probably 1916.
Okay,
So this
okay.
is definitely the silent era.
I am with you.
And really right when movies were starting to become, to develop into their current form of, feature length
Uh huh.
films. Carl was, the first person to give star billing to his actors and create movie stars.
Oh my gosh. Was he
Yeah.
involved in? And just tell me if I'm not right on this. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, All Quiet on the Western
Yes.
Front, Phantom
Yep.
of the Opera, Dracula, and Frankenstein.
Yep.
I
All
could.
of those.
I think there's some Oscars in there, right?
There is definitely an Oscar for Best Picture winner for All Quiet on the Western
All
Front. That
Quiet.
won the third Oscar for Best Picture.
1930.
Yeah.
Did a little bit of homework there. Um, I was fascinated by those pictures being in your family,
Yeah.
and there was
So
probably about
Carl,
yeah.
when he's, as the business is building, he's looking for, and starts hiring all his siblings,
Well, that's what you do in family
people he
business,
trusted. And when he ran out of siblings, he started looking at nephews and nieces.
right?
And, he came across the son of his first cousin. That was my grandfather, Max,
Max.
and Max's brother, Kurt.
Okay.
And ended up bringing both of them to Los Angeles to work for Universal.
Was Max at that
Max,
time working in on the international part in Paris, in France?
Well, Max, after coming to work here in Los Angeles, he was sent back to Paris,
Okay.
and that's where he ran the what was called Latin Europe
Mm-hmm.
division of Universal Pictures. And Max's younger brother Kurt, was sent to the Chicago branch to work in distribution.
Gotcha. Okay.
In that position, he came across a theater, and was selling film to a theater in Lowell, Indiana.
Okay.
And he found out that the theater was for sale, and he quickly ran some numbers and decided that he could make more money running the movie theater for himself than working for his uncle Carl. So Kurt left Universal
Okay, I'm with you.
and went into business running the Ritz Theater in Lowell, Indiana.
The Ritz Theater in Lowell, Indiana.
Yeah,
I love that.
and that's how the family got involved with exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
We have a letter from that's up in the lobby of the Royal Theater, written in December of 1935, on the stationery of the Ritz Theater in Lowell, Indiana, where Kurt writes to his brother Max in Paris, and expresses some concern about the family still being in Europe. This is a Jewish family, and their parents were still in Germany, even though Max was in Paris. They still had their parents in Germany, and they start formulating the idea of going into business together, running movie theaters in the United States.
It all makes sense, Greg.
And that then came about in 1938. They, I think Max didn't necessarily want to be in the Midwest, and he had enjoyed his time in California. And there was already, some, refugees from Hitler's Europe making their way to Los Angeles. So the idea came up: let's do this, but let's do this in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And in 1938, they acquired 2 movie theaters in the Highland Park neighborhood.
Right.
Of Los Angeles.
Nice neighborhood. That was, those areas, that was a great neighborhood. I mean, my parents were born in Inglewood in 35 and 38, and then came over to Burbank, where I think my dad said, which he said it looked like a farmland when he came over the hill at 8 years old, before World War II. So that reminds me now, you're talking about Universal and just the chickens, and those are some of the things that were still there, that type of land. Before,
suburban Los Angeles was very agricultural.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there were bean fields between Beverly Hills and downtown LA. This is the 30s, and yes, Hollywood had now was an industry, so to speak, in town, but
Hollywoodland.
Los Angeles was still a long way from the rest of the country.
Oh, it was.
But in the then in the run up to World War II, LA starts growing quite a bit. Defense industry,
Lockheed,
obviously,
right?
All kinds of stuff happening. Major ports on the Pacific, which was a theater of operations. And so as the city grows, Max and Kurt, go from these 2 movie theaters to having 6 theaters
during that time. And people needed the theater, Greg. People needed to go to the theaters.
I can't believe how much movie going, was a fact of life. I mean, most Americans, the vast majority of Americans would go to the movies regularly, maybe once a week.
Yes.
And, the movie theaters I mean, provided everything. It was movies, and it was the radio.
The movies and the radio. Absolutely. These are stories that we remember hearing from our grandparents, right? Yeah. And for me, I'm older than you, my parents. An era, and it went to transistor radios with my mom and dad listening to Vin Scully, Dodger games, which is another topic we could talk about at another time.
That is definitely another topic. But the idea that, on a Saturday or Sunday, you would take the kids, you'd drop them off at the movie theater, and they would spend the entire day there, at the neighborhood theater, because they would see, it would be a double bill with the newsreel and the comic and and a cereal and something like that. And, and the kids would spend the entire day at the theater, so the parents could go and do what they needed to do.
Right. And even before that, it was the Nickelodeons. I mean, you hear people, they would spend the day at a Nickelodeon. But remember how many months films were at theaters? I would say probably up until the 80s. I mean, there were some films, Gone with the Wind
films would play for a long, long time.
Long
yes,
time.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you could bring a film back. if all of a sudden there was a hole in the schedule and something didn't do as well as you thought it did, you'd bring back some classic. Because
Okay.
the only way to see a movie was in a movie theater.
That's right.
Now
I
that
mean,
all changed, but that all
2001 Space
changed.
Odyssey was like a
Yeah,
family. We went as a family to see
yeah,
that movie. Big films
yeah.
that came out were family events. I love that. I noticed too, just looking around at some of your theaters, the marquee. You have just wonderful vintage marquees with the, not the big neon signs. I mean, I know some of them do, but I just love the simplicity of seeing a marquee change. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. hmm
um,
That was my first job.
oh, I was it. With the device that you have to put the letters up on.
No, back in the day when you had to climb up the ladder and change the letters.
Oh, okay. There you go. We're going way back. So
Yeah.
Max and Kurt were in the movie business together. And
Yes.
how long did they stay in the theater business together as families?
So they stayed together until the late 40s, early 50s.
Uh-huh.
What happened is, while they were doing really well with these 6 theaters in LA and the expanding economy, post-war economy, one of the things that came about in that post-war period was the advent of television.
Right.
And now all of a sudden there was this new form of in-home entertainment that was more competitive, I guess, for a period of time with movie going. And movie going declined precipitously, especially the neighborhood type theaters that my grandparents operated. And the business went from 6 locations to one.
Oh my goodness.
And because of the loss of revenue, Kurt left the business,
Okay.
um, and ended up having a very successful career together with his wife in life insurance.
There you go.
Um, but that left Max alone running just one theater, the Los Feliz Theater on Vermont Avenue in Los Feliz.
And I love that area.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Ferndale was one of my favorite parks. It was the access to get up to Griffith Park.
Yep.
Um, not the observatory. That was an access to get to the observatory. That particular
Yep.
area was a wealthy area, and it still is a very nice area.
Yeah.
The Los Feliz. So they went from 6 to 1 theaters.
Yes. And it was during this period that Max switched from playing, just the Hollywood films on later availability than maybe when they played at the big palaces, and started playing more and more foreign films and art films.
Let me take a real quick break. I want to pivot into that art film conversation. Stand by for our sponsors just a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. We've got Greg Laemmle with us today, and we are talking about the history of the family business in the theaters, theater owners, and kind of moving into theaters coming from 6 that were owned by his family, Kurt and Max, his dad, his grandfather, Max, I apologize, and a time in the late 40s and 50s coming down to 1 theater in the Los Feliz area. And tell us again, as you were stating before we went to break, what kind of revived? What was the vision? What was the thought process on how to revive these theaters? What did you guys have to do?
Well, the thought process was, how do you, put something that's going to be unique and different and attract an audience? I mean, that's really what it's, always been about.
Yes.
And Max hit upon the idea of playing foreign language um, and documentaries and independent films. Even back then, there were independent films, and catering to a more sophisticated audience that so that he could draw people from further than just the immediate neighborhood.
Right. So back with bringing indies in, was that an opportunity, like reaching out to independent film companies and kind of putting deals together, like, hey, we've got a theater, we'd love to show your premieres or screenings? I mean, how did that get marketed in the mecca of the Hollywood area in the the 50s and 60s?
Well, you would work with the critics at the film critics at the local paper. There were film
Okay.
critics back then, and you would get would find out make sure that they reviewed the film. and that people would read about it that way. There was, some degree of advertising. A lot of it was, I mean, my grandfather had a list of, the address for every French language teacher at a public school or private school even. And if there was going to be a French language film, he'd make sure they got a postcard or a letter letting them know about the film and maybe getting them to bring their students to the theater.
Oh, okay. I
It was,
understand.
it was finding audience members one by one.
So he would procure the content and then market it and bring Algiers. Like I took a film class before, and Algiers was one of them. And you would go out to the professors, the teachers, and say, "We're going to show this film. Bring your students in." Something like that.
Yep, something like that, very much like that. And finding what niche audience opportunities were there? Were there people who wanted to see French films? Was there an audience for Italian films? Was there an audience for Japanese films? With the Nisei community here in LA.
Right.
And then knowing the filmmakers that have a reputation, they're starting to have some international film festivals in this post-war period, the Cannes Film Festival, the Venice Film Festival, and so on and so forth. And you would just sort of track what films were being acquired for U.S. distribution and find a way to bring them to your theaters. And again, these films were, if there was an audience to watch stuff on TV, they weren't getting these kinds of programs. So you could bring back classic films from before the war that had been made overseas, films from Jean Renoir and other filmmakers.
Well, kind of the beginning of the Turner Classics. I mean, which of course is one of my favorite. That's a whole other world. But I mean, again, a
but
place
yes,
where
the idea that there were these classic movies that people wanted to see and that you couldn't understand or appreciate. You would. I shouldn't say you couldn't, but you could better appreciate current films by seeing other films from the past. That maybe had influenced the filmmakers.
And then you've got, again, it's generational. You have maybe, your grandmother bringing you to the theater to watch a film that she grew up with or whatever that might be. And you get people, hooked on your theater style and the art that you bring to it generationally.
And as you acquire people coming to the theater, getting them to, and enjoying something, you give them a flyer, you get them on the mailing list.
You get your regulars.
And that's correct. So then they're starting to come back more and more. And that's just how he kept that one theater alive.
Okay.
And as the audience for these types of movies grew with the city of Los Angeles, there then in the, mid 60s became an opportunity to start expanding again.
Right.
And that coincided with my father,
Robert,
coming of age and wanting to join, and expressing interest in joining the business. And they pushed then to open the Esquire Theater in Pasadena in 1964. And then in 1966, we opened the Plaza Theater in Westwood, which was the first theater that had been built in Westwood Village, since the classic movie theaters were built in the 30s and 40s.
Well, and Westwood became known when I was in junior high. We called it junior high and high school. We went to Westwood on a date when you were in high school.
Oh, yeah.
That was because they had movie theaters.
Yeah, there was no hotter place to be than Westwood in the 1970s.
Absolutely.
On a Friday and Saturday night to see a movie.
Absolutely. It was
and that started with us building the Plaza Theater in 66 and the Regent Theater in 1968.
Yes.
And then the Monica Theater in Santa Monica in 1970 and so on and so forth. We just, started adding a lot of theaters and expanding with the city and expanding with the audiences that was interested in, now becoming, really interested in these foreign language films, the French New Wave, Ingmar Bergman, the films of Federico Fellini, and all these landmark, filmmakers of foreign language cinema.
Right. So the Monica Theater, what street was that on, or is it on? Apologize.
2nd Street in Santa Monica.
Okay, 2nd Street it was. I was thinking Montana. So your dad, is he on the advisory side or is he hands-on? Tell me how.
Hands-on, completely hands-on.
Okay. And with the theater companies, when you went from the one in the Los Feliz and started growing, what was the operation set up like? With who's screening, who's snack bar? How is the company real quickly kind of run the operations? back in the day?
It's my dad and my grandfather working out of an office at the house,
Yeah.
and then acquiring one office employee to join them, and then adding people. In some cases, uh, you know, they started having to have theater managers if they since they couldn't be there, to open the theater every day and for all the shows. So you have a staff at the theater. Um, and just growing slowly and surely, adding staff as needed.
Right, right. I always wondered too, I think as long as I've been going to a theater, you pay a certain amount for your ticket to see the show, and then you get your popcorn and juju beads and cokes and everything like that. And that's just another area of revenue, the snack bar.
Sure, it is indeed. Although the people that tended to see the kinds of movies that we show spend a little bit less at the concession stands.
I know you're always,
But everybody loves popcorn.
yeah. Today you have to have people come through. Can I see your bag, ma'am? I brought my own popcorn. Please don't kick me out. Okay, so you're in the your dad started. Did you say was it in the 70s or the
My dad started in the mid 60s.
mid 60s and 70s? Okay.
Yeah, and we went through a big expansion phase.
Yes.
Through the end of the 60s into the early 70s.
Was there? I know that. I think there were some theaters that maybe went through some hard times and succumbed to showing less desirable films, shall we say? And next thing you know, you'd be maybe driving down a street in Hollywood and you would see that it might have a few X's on it. And you're like, I don't remember that theater having those type of films.
Yep.
A way to stay in business, right? I think for some of those theaters.
It was a way to stay in business. And many of the top art films in Los Angeles went that route.
Okay.
We did not.
You did not. I love that. Kept the ethics. Family business.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, really, who wants to? Yeah, it's just a business decision. I'm sure it was never a discussion that you all had.
Look, I mean, in many cases, many of the foreign films did have a more risque
yes
attitude, and in some cases, many of them were marketed, to play up that angle, that they had more adult themes.
Sure, absolutely. Because
I
apologize.
Yeah, no.
I was going to say the ratings. The ratings. When did the ratings begin, Greg? I'm trying to remember. We had G and GP and tell me.
Right. So there was a back in the day. Going back to the late 20s and the early 30s, a lot of the silent films and even the early talkies were very risque.
Yeah.
And the church and other organized religious groups were, very anti-Hollywood. So the studios got together and formed the Hays office,
okay,
which came up with a production code. And films had to be films that were produced by the major studios all complied with this code that would, you couldn't show a husband and wife in bed together, and there were just all kinds of elements to the code. And when we think of, films from that period, think of the scene from The Aviator where he's going in to talk about, Jane Russell's bra in The Outlaw.
Yeah, right.
that was the Hays office.
That was the Hays office.
So eventually you got to a point, I think probably in the late 50s or early 60s, where a number of producers started producing films that were violating the code, the production code.
Right.
And, we needed to come up with, so it was clear that the production code could no longer, hold, that audiences were demanding, a different, a more adult films. And, the studios were worried, well, we can't have a free for all.
Right.
And someone came up with the idea, well, we'll create the motion picture, the ratings board.
Right.
And, we will rate films so that parents, can decide, is this film appropriate or not appropriate? That theater owners can, if they choose, enforce the code and not let children under a certain age either into the movie or only see the movie if they have a guardian with them.
Right.
And that's where you came up with the code for G, general audience,
Right.
PG,
PG,
parental guidance, R.
13 or
Yeah, well, no, PG-13 didn't exist at the first.
oh,
It was G, PG, R, and of course X.
right. Okay. Right. PG-13 came later.
PG-13 came about, I think, with if my recollection is correct, with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Okay.
The idea was the film was a little intense to be, PG,
Okay.
but they didn't want to, it would have been a real problem to make it an R-rated film. So they came up with this new category of PG-13.
We need the
And
revenue.
also, they never they trademarked the ratings, but they never trademarked the X rating. So all of a sudden, the producers of porn films realized, we can get a lot of attention
Right.
by calling our films X-rated without actually having to submit them to the ratings board, because it costs money to submit them to the ratings board. They knew where they were going to get the X rating, so they just went with it.
Oh,
And then all of a sudden you had X and double X and triple X and competing with themselves. So
competing with
they got rid
themselves.
of the X rating eventually, the ratings board,
Yeah.
and came up with NC-17.
Oh, I remember that code. Yeah,
Yeah.
NC-17. What does the NC stand for? I
No
don't know.
children under
Oh,
seven.
I
No
was
children
thinking
under
that.
17.
I was thinking it was no children under 17.
No, that's it.
So
You were
it,
absolutely even with, because you can bring a young person to see an R-rated film,
yeah, right.
but
Sneaking in. But
in
we just,
theory, you cannot. No one under 17 can go see, even with their parent, can see an NC-17 film.
right. Yeah, big deals
So
and what you can get away with back then, right? Some of the films that were out. Oh gosh. Um, that's fascinating. Did that was that a headache for your dad? In any way, shape, or form? Was there, gosh, now we have to manage that piece. We're already trying to just get people to get into the theater. Did that ever cause a challenge to get people in to buy tickets?
did what, the
The
ratings?
ratings, yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, okay. Everyone just went with it. What
I
was,
mean,
sorry.
many of our films were released. The ratings only, you only have to get the film rated if you're part of the Motion Picture Association of America,
Yeah,
or signatory company. So
right,
a lot of independent producers or distributors would just release their films unrated,
right,
and
gotcha.
that happens to this day.
Okay, so I didn't know that. I learned something there.
Yeah.
Were there any other, during that particular era, any other challenges or any challenges that came up in the 70s, 80s, 90s?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's always no.
That we talked about television being
Um,
one challenge.
yeah, well, we'd already weathered television.
Yes.
Movies, survived, and movie going changed. It's probably, people were not necessarily regularly going. All Americans were not going to the movies once a week. There's no doubt that admissions declined, but movie going was still very popular.
Did the drive-in
Um,
theaters ever, uh, I don't know,
no, that was that's just a
different
different type of
style?
movie going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sneak.
Um, but let's see, in the late 70s, you do start having, and certainly by the early 80s, you have a new form of in-home entertainment, and that is, well, you have cable that
Okay.
starts coming up,
Right.
and then you also have the development of VHS.
Yeah, you can record
Um,
things.
well, not only can you record things, but you can, now you can go get a movie
Right.
to watch at home,
From Blockbuster.
and not worry about when it's going to appear on television, or that it's going to have commercial interruptions or all that kind of thing. You can go to, well, yeah, it wasn't, yeah, you can go to the video rental store and get a movie.
That was
Um,
that had to be a
so that,
real big challenge.
well, I think there was a concern that it was a challenge, and perhaps it did change movie going, but it also provided a huge revenue stream for the studios, because now they could not just get money from people going to see their movies in movie theaters, and they could not just only get money from, or with maybe the additional revenue that comes from having the film, once a year on TV or something like that. But now they're licensing their films, for this new form of ancillary revenue.
I'd like to talk more about that. We're going to take a real quick break, and we'll be right back with Greg Laemmle. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. We have Greg here, and we're discussing some different types of challenges. We've talked about in the early days where the invention of television had people sitting in their living rooms, maybe not as much in the theaters, and we were just talking about how the invention of the VHS and being able to go pick up a blockbuster movie and watch it on your own terms, and how that kind of was just another change in how we view movies. How did we kind of, that era lasted a long time. There was a blockbuster here in Oklahoma City that closed, I'm going to say, 5 years ago, Greg. I mean, they were able to survive brick and mortar, diversified a little bit, but it lasted a long time. Right?
It's still around. I mean, you can argue that, look, you go to a convenience store and you'll see a red box at the front of the store where they're still renting DVDs.
My brother, Robert Deckman, loves Redbox. Him and his wife. Yep.
Yeah. So, look, we have been existing in competition within home entertainment in the late 40s. I won't say that moviegoing hasn't, that it hasn't had an impact. But moviegoing is continuing, and we're going to survive, this new challenge of VOD. We're competing. Where are people going to? People want entertainment. They love filmed entertainment. It's just a question of, are they going to, go to a movie theater to see a movie, or are they going to watch it at home? But however they're doing it, at some level, it's funding production, and it's funding the distribution of films from all over the globe. And as there are more films for people to see, there's going to be more hits. That's all there is to it.
Well, when you look at the award season, and I'm in the Screen Actors Guild, so I do get screeners at the end of the year. Oh my gosh, there's 5 times more screeners now because of VOD. So many more opportunities for people to have content out there and to be nominated. And I know on the other side of the coin, you have actors like Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg that have really been voices for people to come into the theater to have that experience on the big screen. That is how a film should be viewed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's an organization that those guys are in for that, some type of association to promote going to the theaters.
Well, there is our organization, which is the National Association of Theater Owners, NATO.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Not the North Atlantic Treaty, but the National Association of Theater Owners, which represents, it's a lobbying body in Washington for theater owners, but also, just promoting the idea of exhibition.
I did not know that.
And the concerns of exhibitors. Yep.
Are there go ahead.
Yeah.
Are there any current topics right now that are with the NATO group? Anything?
Well, one of the things that NATO did look, during the shutdown, NATO was a force for coming up with some kind of relief for theaters, because theaters had been shuttered or were certainly impacted by the
pandemic,
by the shutdown, by the pandemic. And eventually they, allied with some other, similarly impacted industries to create the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program, which was signed into law in December of 2020, and finally provided relief for businesses that had been shut down. You remember the PPP program was great, but it was for payroll for businesses that were operating.
Correct.
If you weren't operating, there was nothing to help a business that still had rent, still had utilities, and was completely shut down, or
like a restaurant,
shut down.
Restaurant, theater.
Well, restaurants were restaurants were shut down for a while, but restaurants were able to reopen, and certainly they could still do takeout and other kinds of things.
They got real.
Yeah, they got creative. But if you talk about a movie theater, if you talk about a live theater venue, a music venue,
no, couldn't go.
Many of these places were 100% shut down.
100% shut down.
So NATO lobbied for that kind of support, and then coming out of the pandemic, they've been lobbying for just promoting the idea of movie going. They came up with the idea of National Cinema Day, which came up last year on Labor Day weekend, where theaters across the country dropped their price to, I think, $3 admission. just to get people back into,
Is this an
to come back.
annual event?
It's going to be returning. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't reveal the date
I'm not.
just
I'm
yet,
not. But I'll go to your
but
Instagram.
look for it
Yes.
coming up soon, National Cinema Day. And it's a
Nash.
great opportunity. The theaters were packed.
That is a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I was not aware that you had that organization.
Yeah. I mean, people complain about how much movie tickets cost, and it's a factor. But look, it is still, without a doubt, the cheapest form of out-of-home entertainment.
I love going to look and picking my films, and as a senior now, I get a little bit of a discount.
Yeah.
But going in, and then of course now with our, I'm not going to say SKU, but the little square box that you show the theater manager. You're not necessarily. They actually give you a ticket. I love that because I love to hold that ticket.
Right.
But so yeah, people are purchasing their tickets online and just coming to the theaters, which makes it very convenient.
Yes.
Well, tell me some of the things, I would say, some of the things that you're most proud of being a part of the Laemmle family theater business.
Well, I'm proud that we're a family-owned business that's survived 3 generations in 85 years.
It's
That
amazing.
we've survived the advent, the advent of television. We've survived, the introduction of DVD, VHS, DVD, VOD, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That we've maintained our independence. As Cineplex Odeon and the circuits were buying up independent theaters or outcompeting them and shutting them down, all over the country, that we've stayed a locally owned family business, family operated business.
Now, let me ask you, I understand you have 3 sons?
Yes.
Okay. Are they in the business?
No, not yet.
Nah. I had a deep breath there. Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. They all love movies. And they'll find their way into whatever it is that they find, and it may be the movie, maybe running Laemmle Theaters.
I
So
I love that.
jury is still out on that.
The jury's still out. I'll have to check back later on that. What I'd like to close with today is I understand that you have a film, and it's called Only in Theaters, that Raphael Sabarge, I believe, produced and directed. Can you tell me how that came about?
Well, so Raphael he was been an actor his entire life. You can check out his list of
Yes.
credits on IMDb. But he had started making documentary films and made a documentary about the Los Angeles River,
Okay.
local public TV channel. But he wanted it to play in a movie theater, and he found his way to our door, and we figured out how to get that screening, to happen. We're supporters of. I grew up in Los Feliz by the LA River,
By the
so
LA River.
I was aware of the efforts to revitalize the river, and I
Yes.
wanted to support the screening of that film. He ended up making a second film about the history of agriculture in Los Angeles, and its current situation now. Um, he then called me up, and we arranged for screening of that second film. And after that screening, he called me up, came in. He says, "I want to make my next documentary about the history of Laemmle Theaters."
Oh my goodness.
And now we've had lots of filmmakers that we've worked with over the years, and many of them said somebody should make a movie about Laemmle Theaters. Raphael was the first person who said, "I'm going to do it."
When was
And
that?
and
When
having
did that start?
so this was in late 2018.
Oh, pre-pandemic.
Yeah, pre-pandemic. We started production, or he started production in early 2019.
Okay.
And as he was starting production, well, we went through a process of potentially thinking about selling the business,
All right.
and he ended up getting a front seat, for that process.
Wow.
A decision at the end of 2019 not to sell,
That was a big
and
decision.
it was a big decision, and not knowing what was coming in 2020
I,
with, but he stayed with the project. Through all of this, it ended up, I think a documentary that he thought he would, make in a couple weeks, or shoot in a couple weeks, and do the editing, turned into it, the reopening of the theaters in April of 2021.
So
Um,
during the pandemic time, because I think I missed something here, were you filming? Were you filming with masks? How were you managing around?
a lot of the filming was done via Zoom
Okay,
interviews, and there was, once it became clear that there was a safe way to shoot in person, we would follow those procedures.
sure. Yeah, we always,
Distancing, crew masked, all that kind of stuff.
yes. Well, I loved the
But it's
film.
a terrific film, and
It's a terrific film.
it premiered at the Santa Barbara Film Festival in 2022, March of 2022. That's the first time I saw it.
Oh, what was
Not
that?
involved.
What was that like for you?
That was a weird.
There you are, third generation on the big screen.
Yes,
Did you have popcorn?
uh, of course,
I think
always.
that is just full circle, Greg.
Yeah, yeah. But the film is, it's now available online. It is on Amazon and on demand. Um, it's been released on DVD by Keener Lorber. You can find out more information at onlyintheaters.com.
Okay.
THERS.
Yeah, because some people say TRS.
Yeah, as is our company name, is TRES. But anyway, just to clarify, onlyintheaters.com. And I hope people take a look at it. It's, look, it's about our family and the business, but it's about movie going. It's about filmmakers and how important they feel the movie going experience is, how it inspired them to become movie makers in many cases, how many of them became inspired to become movie makers by seeing a movie at Laemmle Theaters,
Absolutely.
and some of those kinds of stories. And look, yes, it's about our family and our desire to keep in this business and our dedication to it, but it could be about, any independent movie theater owner anywhere in this country. And there are still lots of us. We're either operating for-profit businesses,
Right.
running our single screen theaters in small towns, or it's a community that's banded together to, reopen, a movie theater in the downtown and keep it going, as a non-for-profit business. We're all dedicated to this art form and keeping alive movie going in movie theaters, in many cases making sure that we have room for art films and independent films and foreign language films and documentaries, and it's not just the blockbusters. And I think it's a love letter for movie going.
Oh, you just summed up the film. It's a wonderful film to our audience. It's a must see, and we'll make sure that all the information is provided when our show is being placed in different formats that we get it out there, get it broadcasted out to. Is there anything else that you want to mention that's important to you and your business? Anything in the future? We've got a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to let it be an open forum for anything you want to talk about in this industry or what's coming. I mean, is there anything that you foresee in the future? I mean,
I think, look, movie going is back. Obviously, as we're recording this, it's early August of 2023, and we've just had, the biggest weekend, one of the biggest box office weekends of all time with Barbie and Oppenheimer.
but
Certainly the biggest weekend we've had since the pandemic.
yes, yes,
Um, we're not necessarily going to be able to sustain that for every week of the year, but I think, at the top end, movie going is back. All these articles and, clickbait about, is this the end of movie going, or is this the end of movie theaters? It's just, it's just that. It's a mantra that's been coming up for 60 and 70 years. Movie theaters are not going away. So we're going to see a slowdown, perhaps, in part because of the strike. Movies aren't being made right now. Movies aren't, actors aren't coming out to promote their movies. And that's causing a delay for some films to be
yes.
held back out of release. But through it all, I think the public has largely voted. Yeah, sure. I think people, VOD is great, and people will stream movies at home, and they'll stream other stuff. But if you really want to see a movie the way it's meant to be seen, go see it in a movie theater.
No, Greg, I completely agree. We just have to get some of the demographic of the younger ones to not and everybody is guilty of being on our iPhones, of watching shows. You could be on an airplane, and there's you're watching a movie on an iPhone or iPad, and people need to be encouraged to get out to the big screen. Talk about going to the theaters. Take your grandchildren to the theater. Let them experience what it's like going into a movie theater. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, well, look, I will say that post-pandemic, the younger audience has actually been leading the charge.
Good.
Where we're missing, the art house films have not come back in the same way.
Okay.
And that historically was an older audience. So if anything, what you need to do is not take your grandkids to a movie, but you got to take grandma and grandpa back to see a movie.
Oh, well, you know what? You're absolutely right, because I know that there's not as many butts in churches, too. That's become a problem post-pandemic. People just are watching, their favorite whatever online. So you're probably absolutely right. Get grandma and grandpa out of the house.
It's a demographic that was forced to move online by the shutdown.
Yeah.
And it's also, let's face it, it's a demographic that had greater legitimate fears about getting sick.
Yeah, sure.
And just because movie theaters reopened in 2021, in the spring of 2021, let's not forget, we also had at least a year of Delta wave and Omicron wave and this, and this, that, and the other. And so it was more than just a year of being shut down or these people staying in private and staying secluded. So they've discovered, going online, and we need to get them back into the movie theaters. We need to get them back in public. We are social beings.
Absolutely.
And movie going provides a real basic human need. We want to hear stories. We're sitting around the campfire.
Yes.
Prehistoric times, hearing stories, and the movies provide that same kind of storytelling experience, and it's meant to be done in public.
Well, I remember a couple weeks ago an interview Tom Cruise did. He says, I have this film, and this film booked on a weekend. I go to the opening. He wants to be in those films that are opening. I'm not just saying the screenings, just to have that experience, to be in a theater with strangers, complete strangers, sitting in there enjoying a film together. You're
sitting in there with strangers. You're all laughing. You're all gasping.
Yes.
And the other thing, you don't have a remote in your hand.
You're right.
So you don't have control. Even if you're really good about watching a movie at home, and you've got, and you don't look at your phone, and you don't get up and go to the refrigerator.
Right.
The fact that that you can turn it on and off is just a different investment in the storytelling. You're giving yourself over to the filmmaker for this period of time.
It's an investment.
I get it. Someone's, talking, another row over, and someone's on their iPhone. It's not ideal, but that's also part of it. It's sharing that experience with the public, both the good and the bad. And when it's really good and you are just totally in another world, and everyone else around you is in that world, it's magic.
It is magic.
It's church.
Agree. It is church. We'll close with that. Is there a website for the Laemmle Theaters that you'd like to share?
Oh, sure. We are at laemmle.com, LAEMMLE.com. Get showtimes and information about all the films that we're playing and what we do. And, I'll just say, support your local businesses, whether it's your local movie theater or a local restaurant. I think, supporting locally owned businesses, family owned and operated businesses. We're the backbone of so many communities. We send our kids to the schools with our patrons.
Yes.
And we provide our charitable dollars locally into the community. And, we can't necessarily do everything the big corporations can do, but we deliver a lot more. So I'll make that pitch as well.
Greg Laemmle, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the Captain's Table today. We appreciate your time, and we're going to wrap it up. Hope to have you back again one day, and everybody tune in to a Laemmle Theater in your community. Have a great day.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.